Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gentleman's Standard. I'm Yorel Francis.
And I'm Cecil Burrows.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about the silence. Um, and it's a weighty topic, as we were discussing prior to coming on the air.
Yeah, this is definitely one where um, we're going to revisit at some point in time. We have some guests that we're planning, and we're going to go deep on this one to a degree now, and with some individuals that are tied into this space. Definitely weighty.
I think that for me, one of the most dangerous forms of silence is not refusing to talk, it's
Hmm.
convincing yourself that you don't need to talk, and building it up in your head. You don't need to have that conversation or whatever the subject may be. And I think that's where we let the silence take over. The interesting thing about silence is I think silence can be a tool, and I think that it can work uh, to your benefit, and it can be detrimental. And the way I see silence as a benefit, the way I use silence is in my professional life. I find that silence is golden, just in terms of how I comport myself, how I execute my job, how I interact with my colleagues. I take the less is more approach, and I do that because I've learned over time that it's a strategy that works for me. And I do that in meetings. I think I've talked about it before, where I don't have to oversell, I don't have to overshare. I just get to the point, explain what the problem is, and then listen to solutions. And I think that's a great way to just keep conversations going and the ball rolling. And then where I think silence can be detrimental is compartmentalizing and holding important things in. Um, and I think that that's turns into, then it becomes something that's a burden. And then that silence starts eating you up. And I think that's where silence can become dangerous.
Yeah, um, I saw this, and it was so powerful when I saw it. And it basically says, men, gentlemen, are trained to go quiet at exactly the moment that speaking would save them. Right? It's and we've talked about this in prior pods that, you're paid the big bucks to take it, figure it out, internalize it, and deal with it from that standpoint. And some of that training can cause you to go down path of, these people don't want to hear what my struggles and opportunities and issues are.
Mm.
I'm not here to put the burden on somebody else on what I've got to deal with. And if I share that, it decreases my value. It decreases me in some shape, form, or fashion. When really you have got to figure out a way to unburden yourself on things that are obstacles in front of you, that are really working to derail you to the point that you're making. And the interesting thing with silence, and how this hit me when we're going on this topic, was silence is a discipline when you choose it. But when it when it is the only setting you have, and sitting in a room, it's a liability, right?
Absolutely.
There's a difference between being emotionally intelligent, and we talked about this, right? Composure and presence and inner standard, and things along those lines. And pausing for a beat and listening to understand, not listening to talk, where you've got to feel what the moment is, what the topic is, and where you can add value. And some of that requires silence, and perception, and reading the room conceptually. But at some point in time, you've got to articulate your points back, from that standpoint, and it costs you to let moments pass you on a consistent basis. And if you're silent for the sake of being silent, and because you're struggling and you're trying to take on the burden by yourself, it is a career, and in some cases a life ender. And that ultimately is what we're trying to ensure, that for you and I who face this at times during our careers, and personally, we're trying to make sure that we give you as much insight as necessary so you don't go down that path as well. And if you're going down that path, hopefully you can reset and course correct, because exactly the moment that you're being quiet is exactly the moment you should be speaking.
I think that to your point, as men, as boys, and then men,
Hmm.
staying silent or quiet was adaptive. I think that in life, some of us learn to observe, to learn, to read the room, as you stated, and to
Hmm.
also not volunteer weakness. And in a way, those were our survival skills. Um, and then those survival skills then became our life skills. But to your point, sometimes they stop serving us. And that's where the fine line between silence being uh, a positive tool and silence becoming a detrimental tool is walked. Um, the steps that help us survive one chapter in life can then sometimes be a deterrent and hurt us in the next, which is to your point of silence and it becoming a liability in some rooms.
Yeah, it's the reason that I talked about this topic just being extremely weighty was something we saw. I've talked about this before on prior pods. We do a lot of research on these topics, and takes us into some spaces and some eye-opening spaces specifically. And one of the things that, because I unfortunately have had the experience in my professional career in the corporate world of dealing with individuals that have just been silent and shrunk away and eroded, and eventually the what ends up happening is we lose some really good people to suicide. And an interesting stat for me that I came across is that men make up nearly 80% of suicide deaths in the US.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
when you think about corporate environments, you think about our professional industries, there's a lot of weight that people are carrying in many instances. And what's surprising about those 80% of suicide deaths in the United States is that only 60% of those men, 60% of those men had no documented mental health condition that had been ascribed to them, which means they never entered a system and never reached out for help. The silence was that complete. They literally cordoned themselves off into a space where no one was coming to help, and they were not reaching out for assistance. And that's why I said exactly when you should be speaking is when we're taught to be quiet and just bear the burden ourselves, and the challenges and opportunities ourselves. The more you build your standard up, you care less about this blueprint that some people have given you, this toxic blueprint about just shut up and take it from that standpoint. And you start recognizing how harmful that can be, for yourself. In some of those instances, from a suicide based perspective, these are individuals that had families. They just weren't willing to bear the brunt, and were closed off from overall helping hands and opportunities to express the weight that was really hitting them. That silence is extremely detrimental, if it's not chosen and it chooses you. It's kind of a cage in that space, and it just erodes and erodes and erodes. And that's why, when this topic came up, I said, listen, this is a tough one. This is one that we're definitely going to have to revisit, where people can add a layer of expertise to help this out because we're talking about building standards here and setting standards. Um, Silence is an important tool you realize you referenced, but it has to be a tool that you master versus letting it master you and closing you off.
And it begs the question, at what point does self-reliance become self-isolation? As we look at those stats, it's a worthy conversation. Uh, the price of being the strong one, the price of being the leader. It also harkens back to our connection conversation, staying silent. It's a place you get stuck in sometimes. And it's a place where, if you're not careful, you become so isolated you can't pull yourself out. And the thing about it is, I feel sometimes as men, we feel like it's not okay to show uncertainty, and it's not okay to be vulnerable and to not have the answer. And I think that's one of the things that pushes us into that silent cage, because we feel like we always need to be, as leaders, some of us, the buck stops with us, and the all-seeing eye, and the answer for everything. And I think that, in my opinion, strong leaders are those that reach out and tie and bring those connections with their coworkers and working partners together, to answer those questions. And I think that sometimes that's something as men we sometimes miss. Um, Sometimes it becomes a performance as opposed to just understanding that, as my spouse says, it's okay not to be okay.
hmm hmm Yeah, this for me, what moved me in this space is I have a family member that I would talk to all the time, and their response, and this was the trigger word for me that had me um, catch an issue on the professional side. The response to everything was, "I'm fine. I'm straight. I'm fine." But you can feel the pain behind them telling you that, right?
Mhm.
Are you all right? I'm straight. I'm straight. I'm fine. No one ever tells you they're fine and straight, and are fine and straight more times than not. I'm good. I'm good. Even to a degree, the way that it internalizes you, and I think pods ago I told you people will not. It's tough to out people me. So I try to read a lot of rooms, and it's learned behavior coming through, just the things I've had to do professionally and personally. Um, Fine for me is never okay, right? Fine for me is I'm maintaining to get the hell out of this room or get the hell out of this situation. And I had somebody that I was checking in on professionally. The response was, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." And my simple next question was, "Are you there? What's going on? You open for coffee?" And this person looked at me like, "How the hell did you know?" Like the look they gave me was saying that to me. And they were like, I said, "You've got to have time for coffee. I know we got time for at least coffee." And they're like, "Okay, let's go grab some coffee." We actually sat down, and this individual was struggling with a feel of inferiority from where they were, and they felt as though they weren't being seen, valued, and trying to figure out how to connect with their leader, and the topic that they were going through. But it was all stemming for things that were happening at home,
Hmm.
and it was going down path of a divorce, and they're working that through, and everything else being added in from a work-based perspective just was getting perceived in a way that was toxic. And in their mind is, I'm going to bear the brunt, and I'm tough. I can get through this. Is how I've been raised. Um, he was able to share with me, father was extremely tough on them. It was their father giving them love, but a lovely home, raised in that way. He was military from that standpoint. You're going to deal with this stuff. There's certain things that you have to get through as a man from this standpoint, and cut off from all feelings. So you didn't show that in that setting. So he felt as though he had to bear the brunt of all of that, and no one had ever asked past the surface of, I'm fine, I'm straight. And I knew I had to deal with that with a family member, and I was really close family member. And I started seeing through the BS that I'm straight and I'm fine. And we had to have a real frank conversation around, what the hell does that mean? Right? You're straight, you're fine. But I know the things that you're going through. You're not straight, you're not fine. Let's talk about it. And when that person gave that to me, I don't know what the calling was for me to ask that question and say, let's do coffee. And it was me pouring that in because I respect this individual. I could see that something was wrong. And just that simple ask, and my asking to individuals who are listening to us, if this resonates with you, something tells you, whether it be divine intervention, whether it be the religious side of things touching you, and your God, for lack of a better word, coming in and saying, you need to dig in deeper, or you need to pour into this person. Lean in on that. You will be shocked, and that's setting a standard, that and you're assuming that everybody's fighting that good fight to set a standard in that way. You'd be shocked around. It may not be with every conversation you have, but that one person needed to hear that from you. And it is one thing in my career, is early in my career, that I have this earlier in my career, where we were able, and we formed such a strong bond and friendship. We've been friends since then, close friends. Um, but the fact that he consistently goes back to this, and he tells me this all the time, that you save so many things just asking me another layer of question. I didn't have all the answers for this individual. He just needed to pour into somebody what was happening, and it helped him realize some things that he needed to do. And the outcome of it is he was able to have a great, frank conversation with his leader to articulate some things that were bothering him that he wasn't willing to do. He was just going to eat it. And it wasn't as big of a molehill as he anticipated, right? And the leader was like, "Oh, I kind of recognize something was going on. I just didn't know how to ask you." So they had that conversation. Now he had him get a divorce, right? But he needed to, from that standpoint. But he also took a step back and said, "There's some things here that I need to figure out to ensure that this is the right way we go about this for the kids." And they have an amicable relationship that they've gone through. He's since remarried. But the fact that somebody actually took the time to ask that question allowed him to break his silence, which was literally heading down a path that I'm so glad we didn't get to see what the outcome could be, just for simply asking that question.
And I think that it becomes a recurring theme. Um, as men, it's okay that you don't need to share everything. But I feel like my one caveat would be, share one true thing. For example, I'm struggling. I'm scared. My dog died. I need help. This is way more than I bargained for. Um, and I think that gives the door then into what you're discussing, where it allows you to come in and then continue the conversation, where if you want to share more, then you go down that path. Um, Funny thing is, that almost happened to me yesterday. I got a text from a dear friend, and I called him immediately, and and uh, and then he was just like, he's busy, and I'll call you back. And so I was waiting for him to call back, but he never did, and I know that he's not okay. And so now I need to follow up on that because I know he's not okay. Um, and this goes back to our conversation about connection, along with our conversations about silence. He is now in the silent mode, in that he sent me a text, but then probably is too, what's the word, doesn't want to be vulnerable to expose his level of crisis. And so now I have to, be the friend that I am and follow up and do as you did and find out what what exactly is going on right now because I know something's going on, and whatever it is, it's not right. So, silence can be deadly, as you said, um, and it is something that needs to be talked about, wrestled with, and not just pushed under the rug.
Yeah, it's and I'm so glad that you're going to be reaching out to this individual. And for me, the gentleman I was connecting with, this was a work associate. We hadn't even had that level, that deep connection at that point. I just realized I had just gone through knowing a family member telling me that they're straight and fine, and I'm like, no, the hell you're not. And this person, and I was like, well, wait a second, something. I've got to do something about this. Just ask a level of question and kind of go down a path on that. And it took a level of maturity for me to get past my BS. When I would tell people I'm fine, I'm straight. Because here's the deal, right? For those that are listening, that are getting these clues and cues. Um, Hopefully, we have some folks that are mentors and want to be mentors, or are just looking for another voice. Um, the silence is not toughness. You're not tough being silent when you don't need to be and bearing the burden yourself, right? You would not, if you're getting chest pains, you would not go, I just need to ignore it. It'll go away. And those chest pains will last. All of a sudden, your jaw's getting tight, your arms getting numb. Everything's good. Everything's good. I'm fine. I'm straight. Silence is the same deal. Silence will lead you down the path of chest pains and jaw tightness, or um, worse from that standpoint. So while you're ignoring cues and clues, ignoring the lifeline is not toughness, is not strength from that standpoint. Also for yourself, you've got to have the toughness to reach out to overcome where you are. It's everything around you telling you, listen, this is on the path of breaking you, and it's creating a cage around you. There's a difference between being silent because you choose it with emotional intelligence to understand the situation you're in and respond accordingly as you're setting a standard, and showing your value, is different than letting the silence choose you and say, we've got this taken care of, and you're not going to reach out. You're not going to own your outcome. Silence will do that to you. That's the double standard of this stuff, right? You can't let it own you. You have to own it.
It's funny how we're so quick to discuss our milestones publicly, our success, our achievements, all the caveats, the good stuff. But when it comes to the bad stuff, most of us just suffer it privately and in silence. And that's part of the conversation. It's part of our socialization. It's part of our, ecosystem, our image of what we think men should be.
Hmm.
And uh, it's it's definitely okay to say I'm not I'm not there. I'm not 100%. I just don't feel like I'm there right now. And sometimes we find it hard to mouth those words. Um, and it's important for your system. It's important for your mental health, your mental well-being, um, for your community, for your society at large, for your family, to be able to manage those conversations and honestly tackle those moments where you feel like you should just put your head in the sand. Because it's a legitimate feeling. Like you just don't want to deal with shit. you know?
Sure. Sure.
Um,
Hmm.
but as men with standards, uh, we embrace that head on and try to have those hard conversations, because I think that's what actually makes us stronger.
In your opinion, to the point you just made, how far back does this go? Because one of the things I saw was 1 in 3 conversations with boys under 14, and this is from the crisis text line insight and data that we had. Um, 1 in 3 boys under 14 mentioned suicide. So we're talking about way, 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 way ago, before you even get to this gentlemanly standard space, right? Older young professionals. Um, so thinking about what you just referenced, like how it's shocking how early we have to deal with this. And what are some things that we should be thinking about on how we pour back into the youth from that perspective, would you say?
It's interesting. I think that society as a whole and men as a whole, we are a microcosm or reflection of what we saw uh,
Hmm.
as boys growing up. And so sometimes it's important to understand that it's okay to unlearn some of the behavior that we witnessed. Um, it's important to understand that sometimes silence is a silence that we owe others. And by that I mean sometimes the silence that, which, to your point of the suicide stat, the silence that we're experiencing doesn't always just hurt us. It hurts others, uh, the people who care about us, the people who know something's amiss. And I think that's I think that's an important part of the cycle, is understanding that A, it can be broken, and B, uh, it reaches beyond our psyche and our sphere. It emanates into the society as a whole, our, you know, close ones, our loved ones.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. So we've talked about the the dangers of having silence choose you. I'd love to go down the path of what happens when you choose silence as an emotional tool. In the grand scheme of how do you curate the presentation uh, of your inner standard, of how you show up in a particular space. And people that we've noticed that have leveraged that in an extremely effective manner. That's you choosing um, the the mechanism of silence, right, to be successful. And we've talked about this before around when we talked about presence and command. Individuals who sat in a room and forgive me, let me take a quick step back. When I saw that stat in the 1 in 3 conversations with boys under 14, a thing I would say for us to do, because this is helpful for not only us but for not only the youth that we'd be connecting with, but for us as well, is if you're trying to figure out a way to get yourself out of a programmed funk of having the silence take you over, a way to do that is to pour back in the community.
Mhm.
If you haven't been involved in community work, I would strongly suggest and nudge you in that direction, whether it be representing Urel could be talking about what it takes to make it in the entertainment industry with youth at a particular coalition convention that may be coming through, speaking engagement opportunity. You'd be shocked and surprised the leaders that are coming up in that segment that are willing and so ready to hear from you. You'd be surprised how rewarding that is back to you for the fact that you've seen this thing connect with the youth. Because, folks, there are a lot of youth that have been programmed down the path of, um, in a from a toxic based perspective, that is just not going to yield great results for them. And quite frankly, a blow up in public could lead to some catastrophe from that standpoint, from folks that have been programmed in a certain way. So pouring that back in ensures that we're not missing anyone. So that's my whole speech on that piece. I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I get a lot out of that. But where I was going down path on is how do we strategically leverage the silence to ensure that it is paying dividends and dues on us, on our standard being set at such a emotionally intelligent level. So I try to, when we have conversations with individuals, is as I'm silent in any conversations that's had in play in a particular room where I'm trying to make a difference, I am strategically listening for where opportunities may be coming in for me to articulate a value I can potentially bring. Right. So why am I in this room? Who am I engaging with? Listening for understanding. You talked about this a while ago where folks would come in and responses that made no sense and connected not at all on what you were what you were discussing and what you were trying to strive through, which immediately gets that person ignored and devalued. I try to listen to cues and clues and opportunities to understand exactly where can I add value based off where and how. There's a reason why I ended up in this room. So I need to shut up. And I've said this before, and forgive me if you're taking it personal, folks that are listening in, but I need to be quiet and pay attention to what exactly is being discussed. How does that tie back to where I potentially bring value, where ultimately the situation maybe uh, originating in front of me as an opportunity, and then where can I apply my points around where I can be seen as a value add on where it is. And if you're not, knowing that you can pull out for later and say, okay, I'm going to let this thing play out fully, but I am going to connect with somebody that's attached to this to say, I'd love to revisit what y'all are talking about because I have some thoughts, but I just trying to formulate my thoughts. That's how you leverage silence in a way to where you can be representative as an opportunity to be connected to the work when we talk about connection, right? I didn't want silence just to be the detrimental implication that's there.
No.
You've got to figure out how to use it as a tool.
For me, in a professional space, uh, silence is access. So it's, you know, choosing to speak when you want to, and it's giving access to whom you deem, you want to give access to. So that's how I use silence in a professional space. In the personal space, it's the opposite end of the spectrum where the people who love us the most, they don't need necessarily perfection. They need access. And
Yeah.
so
Good point.
so
Good
um,
point.
so in the professional sphere, it's about who you give access to, and in the personal sphere, it's about giving access to your loved ones. And I think that's for me the fine line of silence and how you navigate it.
You brought up a good point and be realistic. Before I just want to kind of go back to that. I don't want to gloss over it. Is that you don't is it the goal isn't to open up to everyone. I think is what you said, right? We're not saying, hey, go tell your story to everybody that's here. There's an element of a guarded nature that's pulled in play. That's not what we're telling you. Um, there's safe settings, therapist, partner, trusted friend, and how you go from that standpoint. The point is when you need to, and you recognizing that the silence is creating a cage around you, it's time to open up to somebody,
Hmm.
right? And having that channel access and being deliberate about it, um, building the channel. And you said this while things are calm
Hmm.
is the right way to go about it, right? And it's the same way you'd set up a credit line before an emergency comes up, right? You cannot wait until the crisis finds you before you have to wait because you've waited too long at that point, from that standpoint. So you don't have to open up to everybody, but you got to open up to somebody from
No,
that standpoint.
yeah, clearly, a gentleman doesn't tell everybody everything. I wouldn't even call that wisdom. That's just the standard of
That's a good point. That's a
it's
good point.
oversharing. It's actually what's the mode today. Um, but I believe that every man needs at least one space or place where the performance ends. We talked about that earlier, where you know who you are at home, or who you are when the cameras are off. Um, it feels like silence can be discipline when you choose it to be, but it shouldn't be the only thing you know how to do. Uh, and when silence becomes the only thing you know how to do, that's when we veer into like red. It can actually become like a prison almost, because that's all you know is to just clam up, you know, and that's not a healthy ecosystem to be in. So I think it's important for us to talk about it. We don't have the answer. We just know that it's important to talk about, and it's important to talk. Uh, and it's important to understand silence in its two faces. And it's important to know how to use silence. For me, that's important.
What when you think about individuals in the entertainment industry that you have seen, have been around personally, that had a certain level of emotional intelligence, that they knew how to leverage silence in a way to add weight to their presence, would you say that's really impressed you in that way? You don't have to quote a name, but
Yeah, I mean,
frame
it happens. You know, the people I've modeled myself after. It 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 comes from a value space. It comes from when you have something to protect, which could be your inner sanctum, your inner sanctity, your, you know, whatever you want to, however you want to call it, your emotional intelligence. And I think that when you're in that sphere, you understand that silence, being introspective with your choice of words, with how you choose to share, with how you communicate, period, represents you and what you stand for. And I think that's, for me, that's what I aspire to, and what
Mhm.
I try to emulate.
when 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 you think about the to the point that you're making, the individuals that we're trying to pattern ourselves after, what's been interesting to me is what is always awe-inspiring to me is individuals that show up in a room or a place that you can tell are just drinking from a fire hose. They have no clue how the hell they ended up in this room. I've been that guy several times. And it's like you get rammed into a topic, you get rammed into an initiative, you get rammed into something. And it's simply because you've done such a great job of showing yourself as somebody of value that people are now like, hey, we really need this thought leadership in this room. So you end up in places where I don't know what the hell y'all are talking about. And what I got really, really good about early on, and I patterned myself against it, as you've referenced, the people that were um, uh, that became mentors of mine, is being able to be emotionally intelligent enough to say, let me pause for a beat before I just start weighing in, and don't try to BS my way through things. Ask questions um, around what's truly being asked of you. What are you solving for? And why do you need me involved in this topic? But to get to that, you've got to figure out how to leverage silence as a tool, um, how to internalize information and check for understanding, and being tough enough to ensure the vulnerability comes through to say, hey, I am not aware fully of what y'all are asking of me. We try everything we can. And from a banking based perspective, once you get in a room, a lot of people want to sit there and act like they're experts at everything and aren't emotionally intelligent and tough enough to say, I don't fully get where you're going with this. And it shocks me, the folks that are able to convert where you see that they showed up in a room and you know for a fact the way that they got pulled in that they don't know the full story and enough to really form a thought and are able to leverage the tool of silence and emotional intelligence to eventually, by the end of the meeting, not the end of the week, not the end of the month, not the end of the project, but the end of the meeting, to have pulled things back around to say, okay, now I think I get where you guys are going, ladies and gentlemen that are in this space. I think what I'm hearing is X. Help me understand, am I hearing that right? Okay, now that we've established that, here's the different ways I potentially can assist. Does this sound right? If so, okay, let's figure out different ways that we can partner. This is an individual that's come in and said, I'm going to use my silence and understanding, my emotional intelligence to ensure that y'all realize that I'm a person of just set standards that consistently will check for the main thing being the main thing. And that's how they leverage silence as a tool. If you're able to do that and you're consistently working that as a piece of your weapon set, your weapon skill set, you will find it's harder for silence to cage you in, and not allow you to do the reach out and things like that that can become detrimental. And that's my whole point. Use it as a tool. Don't let it use you.
And I'll cap that on the flip side and close with this. Men and women, actually people in general,
Hmm.
believe that we're valuable because we're useful, right? That is our common denominator.
Hmm.
But we're useful if we can provide, if we can fix things, solve things, lead, and that's when we matter. But when all that disappears, sometimes silence engulfs us. And those are those are the hardest silent cliffs to climb out of. And it's I mean it's just a way of life. I've experienced it. You have. Many people have and will. Um, but I think that it's an important part of the conversation. Um, and sometimes the silence is unplanned. You know what I mean? And is unforeseen. And then you're left with finding and navigating a path out of that. And that's a whole nother podcast.
I love that you said you're going to be reaching out to your friend who is fine, quote unquote.
Correct.
And it goes to a point that we make. There's so many of us that are letting that skate because we're dealing with our own shit. And we're ignoring the cues and clues to check in on some folks that we need to, and you could be that one person as well, right? I could be that one person as well that's going through some stuff and no one's really checked in on me yet to ask that question. From that standpoint, I'm lucky enough to have people that are doing that regularly, and that's because I do that for them. But it goes back to the point that we are trying to make in this, which is silence you choose is composure. Silence that has you as a cage. um, I would say keep one channel open and check on the quiet person next to you,
Mhm.
because you're in the entertainment industry. They are the best actor in the room because they're acting like everything is fine when it's not. And the question will be, are we willing to lend that helping hand to just ask a simple question, which sparks a conversation and allows them to get out of that cage a bit? As gentlemen, that should be our goal.
It's so funny. I'll end with I want to say a short little anecdote. As a kid, I went to high school in Sierra Leone, and one of the things that people would always ask the Creole people is, "Do you know the condition of Shebro Island?" And Shebro Island is the place where Sierra Leone was founded by freed men and women from who fought in the American Civil War. I mean, Revolutionary War. on the King side, and then were put in Nova Scotia, and then they took them back to Freetown in Sierra Leone. But Shelburne Island was where they first landed. And so the thought behind, do you know the condition of Shelburne Island, is, have you been there? Do you know what because it's in shambles. And so, when I think about that, I think about this conversation, and it's about checking in, really, is what is behind that question. Do you know the
Hmm.
condition of Shelburne Island? So for all the Sierra Leoneans out there who know that phrase, hey, what's up? So,
Wow. It's a nice little test. Have you checked in? It's a nice little test.
exactly. Well, guys, thank you for listening, and we'll be back sooner than you think.
We're looking forward to our next conversation, which gets into, are you being your authentic self?
Mm.
Mask off.
Take care, guys.
All right. Have a good one.